You're looking at a gas station. This is one too. And this, Tudor Revival Château-style California mission, commissioned by Canada's biggest oil companies, designed by real architects to fit your neighborhood. There were thousands. Today, almost none survive. Canada didn't just lose its beautiful gas stations, it systematically dismantled one of the most architecturally varied building types it ever created, and what replaced them was never meant to belong. In June 1907, at the corner of Cambie and Smythe Streets in Vancouver, a tiny corrugated iron shed appeared on the side of the road. It was Canada's first purpose-built service station, built by Imperial Oil to solve a very new problem. Before this, motorists bought gasoline in heavy metal cans from local hardware stores or livery stables, splashing it into their vehicles through funnels. This small shed offered a simpler way. It housed a basic hand-operated hose hooked to an underground tank, allowing drivers to pull off the street, fill their tanks, and drive away. Yet this simple arrangement redefined how cities functioned. It was the birth of a brand new urban building type, proving that the automobile would no longer adapt to the existing city and that the city would have to adapt to the automobile. As the automobile quickly transformed Canadian cities throughout the 1920s, oil companies realized that simple metal sheds would no longer suffice. To win over skeptical communities, they began treating service stations as designed civic objects. From the 1920s through the 1950s, major companies hired professional architects to create buildings that matched local neighborhoods. By 1928, Imperial Oil established 3 standard plan types tailored specifically for commercial downtowns, quiet residential pockets, and rural small towns. Instead of eyesores, communities welcomed structures built in Tudor Revival, Château, California Mission, and cottage styles. In 1937, the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada dedicated a journal feature to gas station design, analysing it as a serious architectural challenge. The peak of this movement was the Joy gas chain, which built 16 castle-like chateau-style stations across the Greater Toronto area during the 1930s, complete with steep stone-capped roofs and decorative turrets. But the very corporations that built these local landmarks eventually pioneered their destruction. Throughout the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1980s, oil companies systematically demolished these custom designs, replacing them with cheap, standardized corporate templates. Today, only one of the original 16 Joy gas stations remains standing, preserved on Lakeshore Boulevard after a $400,000 restoration in 2007. It sits as a quiet monument to an era when a simple fill-up was an aesthetic experience. At its peak in 1989, Canada's retail gasoline network was vast, boasting more than 20,000 stations nationwide. This massive footprint grew from the high watermark of the 1970s, when service stations defined everyday community geography. In those decades, major intersections commonly featured full service stations on 3 or 4 corners. These were vital neighborhood spaces owned by local families where drivers knew their mechanics by name, but this dense personal network quickly shrank. By 2024, the national total fell to just 11,611 stations, a decline of nearly 42% in 35 years. The steepest losses occurred in rural towns, where the closure of a station often meant losing a community hub. The independent, family-owned service station, with its known local mechanic, was increasingly replaced by the corporate canopy and convenience store model, leaving empty corners and identical corporate architecture across the country. In October 1973, the OPEC oil embargo sent shockwaves through the global economy, quadrupling crude prices almost overnight. In Canada, this sudden shock exposed the fragile financial reality of the neighborhood service station. For decades, full-service stations had operated on razor-thin margins, relying on steady, cheap wholesale fuel to get drivers into their service bays. A business model that thrived when gasoline cost 15 cents a litre suddenly broke when prices climbed toward 50 cents. To survive, oil companies overhauled their retail strategy. They rapidly accelerated the transition to self-service, a model that eliminated the need for pump attendants. This new system rewarded high volume, rapid customer turnover, and minimal payroll expenses. This operational shift immediately redefined station design. Ornate, neighborhood-friendly buildings with steep rooflines and custom masonry, built to house multiple service bays and customer lounges, became expensive liabilities. They were costly to heat, maintain, and staff. The new economic climate demanded efficiency above all else. The financial justification for hiring architects to design custom Tudor cottages or stone castles evaporated. In their place came a new commercial priority: getting drivers to pump their own gas as quickly as possible, using the simplest, cheapest structures possible. Beneath the concrete of nearly every neighborhood gas station built before 1970 lay a ticking regulatory time bomb. For decades, the retail fuel industry relied entirely on single-walled steel tanks buried directly in the earth. Over time, moisture in the soil quietly corroded the bare metal. By the time environmental regulators began measuring the damage, studies suggested that approximately 90% of these active and abandoned steel tanks were leaking hydrocarbons directly into the surrounding soil and groundwater. The environmental reckoning arrived in the 1990s, culminating in strict new storage tank systems regulations under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. These rules stripped away the old handoff approach, placing absolute legal liability on the property owners. Simply excavating an old tank and replacing it with a compliant, double-walled system cost at least $100,000. But the true financial catastrophe lay in the soil remediation. If gasoline had seeped into the water table, the cleanup bill quickly scaled from $100,000 to several million dollars for a single property. This massive financial burden froze valuable urban land in place. Across Canadian municipalities, high-traffic corner lots that should have been prime real estate for new housing or retail sat vacant, fenced off, and rotting for decades. High local demand for real estate could not overcome this basic math. The extreme expense of removing the contamination simply swallowed any potential profit. Throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, Canada's major oil companies began quietly offloading their retail networks. Imperial Oil, Shell, and Petro-Canada systematically divested, sold, or franchised their properties to shift toward an asset-light business model. By 2024, integrated refiner marketers directly controlled just 22% of Canadian gas stations. The rest of the market fragmented among independent owners and regional convenience store licensees. This retreat removed the only players with both the massive capital and the long-term brand incentives to build and maintain distinctive station architecture. For the new operators, the station became a low-cost, high-volume checkout point. This corporate exit completed a cumulative process of decline that began with the 1973 oil shock and accelerated under strict environmental liabilities. Today, the surviving Joy gas station on Lakeshore Boulevard in Toronto stands vacant and fenced off. It remains on its corner as a silent, physical emblem of a vanished streetscape, a system of design community hubs that was systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until only this empty castle was left. Today, the vacant Joy gas station stands as a quiet monument to a time when neighborhoods prioritized beauty over mere throughput. As our streets become increasingly standardized, we must ask if convenience was worth the character we lost. What do you think? Let's discuss below.